You're listening to the Twisted Sisters podcast with Allie, a fiery realtor queen, and Samantha, a gypsy wandering her way through life while navigating being a rock star woman with ADHD. Both are former teen moms of two who have faced challenging adversities. They're here to break stereotypes, get real with you about the messiness of life, and remind you that we're all just a little twisted.
Good morning and welcome to the Twisted Sisters podcast. We are here with a special guest today, PT. He is the founder of Livin Foundation. He is also one of your friendly radio hosts on 102.9 The Wolf.
Yeah.
What else do you have to add to this resume of yours?
There's a lot of tentacles, I guess. You know, I mean, I was grateful enough to be able to found a Midwest country music organization, which started as Midwest CMA, and we had to pivot on that, and marketing agency as well too. But I think it's just the entrepreneur in me that loves, starting new ventures and maybe not finishing all of them, but at least starting the journey as best we can. But thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate it very much.
It's kind of funny. I was like trying to research you, and you're kind of like a little hidden ghost
you
still
are.
too. I was like, what?
That's because I'm not on TikTok. I refuse to be on TikTok.
I'm like, I think we're just going to have to go into this a little blind from what I know. But I was trying to like find a little bit of information because I was like, could see that you were starting a lot of those different musical, what did you call it?
Ventures or events or whatever. Yeah.
Yes. But I couldn't see quite where like you were landed in all of it. So I love it. I'm excited to kind of dig into you like really blindly with no other information.
That's cool. Yeah. I mean, let's, digging in. I'm grateful to be on the show, I guess. I think, when it comes to, I think social media and a lot of things, putting out into the universe, what you want people to see or, maybe what you don't want people to see, whatever, can be somewhat frustrating. So if I am being a ghost in any capacity, I'm definitely not trying to. I don't think I'm trying to be any more of an enigma than like I am. I think it's more just like, if anything, I'm, sometimes spread too thin, which we all are. I think sometimes you just it's like, oh, I should probably update that bio. Like I just looked on my Instagram a couple days ago and I saw that I was still the voice of the Big Rig Bandit series, which was like this traveling like semi-truck racing series that I did. And it was kind of pre-pandemic. So it's like, well, that's kind of old info now. You know what I mean? I probably should update that.
Well, you have all of that on there. We just met personally.
Personally.
We're like,
it was
life.
Just trying to like find out. I mean, not that like we're like going deep, like your past.
Why
like,
not? Let's go deep. Isn't that what we do on the Twisted Sisters podcast?
Yeah, exactly. We're getting real twisted over here.
Yeah, twisted right off the bat. That's how you hook them in the podcast game.
So you used to live on 125.
Yeah. So
tell us about how that was.
You do have a realtor here.
Yeah. Well, I will say from a personal standpoint, like most recently, so my wife is from Georgia, so I got married to a girl from Georgia, and I've been a sales guy my whole life, and I say that the greatest sale I ever made was convincing a Georgia peach to move to Minnesota. Okay, so like that, super cool there, and super grateful that she came into my life, and we have a daughter, a 20-month-old daughter. Her name is Olivia. We call her Liv for short, which actually had nothing to do officially with the Livin Foundation, but a lot of people kind of assume that, and her name is Olivia Grace. And so it's kind of like Liv Grace. And I think Liv is something that hopefully I brought to her with just like this passion for deliberate existence, which I think is a lot of what living is, finding your passion and really engaging in that and being able to put your head down on your pillow at night and say that I took advantage of the breath that I was given today. And then my wife is the grace side of the equation. I used to be a lot more of a bull in a china shop.
I don't believe it.
I still can be a little bit. But my wife, Brooke, really taught me a level of grace that is probably one of the greatest gifts that I will have ever received from her. So we say like, live grace. That's sort of our little thing with her coming together. So
that's so
amazing. Thank you very much. So that's a big thing from a personal standpoint in my life. And I do posted probably too many pictures of my daughter. But the funny thing is, I say this, okay, so I could probably, and I'm not a cancer research person by any means, but I could cure cancer tomorrow, okay, and post about it on Instagram. And if I didn't put a picture of Liv, I won't get any traction whatsoever. But I could post a picture of Liv in like a baseball hat of mine and get twice as many.
So it's like a cute puppy.
Like,
exactly. They have to be cute, otherwise we like lose our minds, right?
How is that the algorithm in some capacity?
Like
That's
that
awesome.
one baby that's going around, and I can't think of his name, Willie something. Have you seen this?
The meme one? Where
Yes. Like, poor baby.
No, I'm stuck with a teenager who's like just yells at me. We're scared. We all live on pins and needles. We're scared of this girl. I'm nervous for when she's a teenager.
3 going on 13 or whatever.
She's cute. She's got like the little innocent face, and she's sweet. But man, she gives you that look. You're like, oh God, what did I do now?
Now what?
What do you want? Snacks? I'm like throwing snacks at her.
I'm like,
just like, can we just get in the car and have like a cool morning? Like,
what's your daughter's name?
Lorelai.
I love that. Very pretty.
Thank you. Yeah, her dad and I just came up with it. We loved it. But
cool.
She's a Lorelai. It's funny how after you name your kid, you're like, yeah, that's you.
Definitely.
That's definitely
It's like we
you.
got that one right. Yeah. That's the one thing we got right. The parenting,
The rest
parenting
is up in the air
success. Yeah.
still.
Not sure about the rest of raising them, but we got the name right. That's the cool part.
Exactly.
So you are the founder of Livin Foundation. Can you give us some insight into how you got started on that and what kind of drove you to start it?
Yeah, I sure can. So I guess the elevator speech part about the Livin Foundation is that essentially we are a 100% volunteer run nonprofit that really is trying to start conversations about mental health and mental illness in order to reduce the stigma associated with that. And that combined thing is that's like what we say, get busy living, like get out there and start conversations and so on and so forth. And we feel like by starting these conversations in our everyday lives, that, that's what we're doing is we're reducing the stigma. I have these, shirts and wristbands and all sorts of different swag that has like #livin on it. And it's kind of like, what if livin and #livin was sort of like the pink of breast cancer?
Yeah.
There's nothing positive in per se about breast cancer, but through the color pink, we've created this community where people can bond together, and they know that like if they're at a breast cancer event or if they see somebody with like a sticker, they're like, hey, that's a breast cancer warrior. Like they know my feeling, and it's like a connection there. And I think that's what Livin organically has turned into, right? Is a movement and a community and a place where people can feel connected to one another through, unfortunately, very, very trying times. So the connection piece is obviously mental illness and certainly suicide. And, I lost my father to suicide in 2013. And that was sort of the starting point for Livin having that connection. Now, technically speaking, Livin existed before my connection and my loss of my dad. But it was 2 years after the loss of my father that through the Livin movement and through me wearing my t-shirt and talking about, my depression from the loss of my dad, that really started the movement. And I'll actually never forget it. It's kind of a neat story. I was on a radio station at the time promoting, and I was talking openly about the loss of my dad and just kind of about what the Livin movement like meant to me and stuff like that. And a gentleman came up to me at an event, at a country music event, and he said, hey, which one of your DJs talks about like Livin and losing his dad to suicide? I said, that's me. And he said, I just want to thank you, because every time you talk about that, it gives me a little bit of hope and a little bit of strength that I'm not alone in his situation. And it turns out he had lost his niece earlier that year to suicide. And, he had struggled from that, right? The questions and the whys behind that, and the fact that you always have more questions than answers, I think a lot of times with
absolutely.
a loss by suicide.
And you're never going to get answers.
Right.
That's the hard part.
The unsolved, questions and stuff like that.
Yeah. Terms with that is hard.
And I think that, in any loss, so, I never compare loss, right? Like that's not what we're here to do with Livin or any capacity. However, there is a unique loss when it's a loss by suicide because of this maybe perceived choice, or, you struggle with, again, the questions or this nature of kind of like, hey, this battle of like a self a selfish act or not, and all these different things that go along with it, on top of the normal grief that you feel as a human being suffering a loss. So anyway, that
there's
whole
like a
movement,
shame, I think, that comes along with it. I feel like suicide was put into a box somehow, and I think the one thing I try to tell people is not a one size fits all. Like, I think people have this idea of what it is, and it's really so much more. And there's so many other stories. There's so many other avenues that can bring you to that place that it's not the same for everybody.
Oh no, there's no blueprint for
there's no,
not for
it's not. Yeah, I agree.
Front end or the back end of it,
exactly.
unfortunately. And I think that the dynamic, and that's why I think mental health in general is such a tough topic, because if I break my arm right here, right now, which hopefully doesn't happen during the twisted, not sure how twisted we're going to get here, but if, to twist my arm and break my wrist or something, you can go get an x-ray, you can get a diagnosis. It's like, hey, there's a cast, 6 to 8 weeks, yada, yada, yada. It's much more cut and dry, right? Yeah. Whereas if you're battling something, in your mind, we don't have as much of the ability to pinpoint that. And to your point, what are the triggers that have, or the stressors that have kind of gotten to your point, the genetic components of it. There's a lot of
we've learned how to get through life and act like we're good.
Right.
Some of us are the best actors, actresses.
100%.
Absolutely. And everybody's like, well, I didn't see that. And it's like, well, you weren't supposed to.
Right.
There's a reason you didn't see that. Well,
another one that I see a lot with with losses by suicide is like you'll see somebody that it's like whether they're famous or they're wealthy or whatever, where the common answer or the common maybe point of is like, well, that person had it all. And it's like, well, that's such a and I understand where those people are coming from in saying that, because on the surface, it appears as though they had it all, right? But like, I think the whole point becomes, when your self-worth is at a level where it is really, dangerous, right? Like, it doesn't matter if you're driving a Ferrari or if you're driving a Pontiac, like, you know what I mean? Like,
we're all human.
Right.
The
we're all human.
And
just like cancer, just like other things, mental illness doesn't, it doesn't choose. It doesn't say, well, men only or women only or whites only or black. It's like, it's not how it works, man. Everybody can be affected.
And what's super hard about mental illness too is we're all genetically dispositioned differently. So what helps some people isn't going to help another person, and how we're wired, how your brain operates, whether you're lacking dopamine, whether you're lacking, trauma based, whatever it is in you, it's hard because the help for that isn't all the same.
Oh yeah, like go back to the wrist issue, right?
Yeah,
like,
it's really learning what you need as a person, who you are, and learning what is going to help that person individually.
100%.
And your triggers.
There's not all that's not always available for everybody,
and they may not know where those resources are. They may not, we've had that with Livin, for example. Like, people go, so we kind of talk. It's like, hey, start the conversation, get out there. We're really, I don't want to say we're loud, but we make a lot of noise in like the mental health universe or whatever, right? And then people will come to our website, and we have some resources on the website where they can go, and we've tried to like direct them. But even to your point, there's so many resources to direct somebody, and depending on where they live, those resources could be completely different, like you've got that. And then to your point, it's like whether it's, group therapy or individual therapy or, a psychologist or medication, or heck, even like yoga or just exercise or just whatever. There are so many ways to get. So yeah, you're right. It's a very unique landscape that we're living in from a standpoint of getting help.
But I love how you guys are loud about it, but in such a, like, I don't want to say it's fun, but it's in such a not so serious. It's like, hey, let's talk about this. Let's like put it out there, but it doesn't have to be so somber and serious.
Right.
And, and it really keeps it so lighthearted. And I think that's so much easier it's approachable, right? It's a lot easier to come to you, and it's a lot easier. It makes that door open so much easier to walk through than when you just kind of feel that, tension, or there's a disposition to it. But I love that about you guys, and that's since I've been
we're not very medically
I think it's
like,
great though, but that's what they need. You need it to be like relatable and like, oh yeah, they're just like me and you, and that's not it's not always the case with some of these things.
And just your kind of mission statement to live life, because we're not getting out of this alive. Nobody is. And
yeah. I mean,
help,
it's
hope,
very
and
much,
hugs.
it's very much that. And I think even going back to the loss of my dad, like I've said that, you know, the type of person that my dad was and who I strive to be is the type of person where, you know, whether you knew them for 4 minutes or for 40 years, like they were going to treat you with the utmost respect, and they're probably going to make you hopefully a better person. Like I literally try to set up my interactions kind of the way that I vision my dad was, which is like, how can I make people, you know, want to be a better sister or a better brother or a better mother or a better father, whatever. And like, what if we all just kind of had that idea of going through life like that and finding our passions and whatever. And yeah, that just kind of became Livin. And you're right. I mean, I appreciate it's by design. So it sounds like the brand is working.
It's working.
But you know, we don't want to be stuffy. We don't want to be, you know, there are plenty of other, you know, great, by the way, like great organizations. And there are plenty of other people in this space doing things in more of what I would consider a rigid approach, or more of like I mean, not that we're not researched, but more of a researched approach and like methodical and whatever. Like we're just, that's not who Livin is. It's never who we will be, you know? So yeah.
But I think that's kind of the mental health area, you know?
Right.
We're all just kind of fucked up, you know? Like, let's be real. Like some of us are just better at hiding it than others.
That's exactly right. In every capacity, somebody's probably having some issues.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And if you're not, you probably will be, because you're going to have a loss somewhere. You're going to lose a relationship. You're going to lose a job. You're going to be struggling financially. Life's just going to hit. You don't get through life without, no matter how much money you have, right? No matter how good things look, you're still going to have issues. And so if it hasn't hit you yet, more than likely it will come at some point in your life.
Yeah.
When you're not expecting it.
Yeah. I heard about you through the Chart House. I was actually supposed to work that night. You guys had a big event there.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
And
I forgot about that.
It was funny because I had my daughter and I was going to stop by there, and I'm like, I don't want to stop my work, you know? But I should have, and I wish I would have at this point. But I had so many people, actually not even from work, other people through my social media reach out, and they were like, how are you not there? Like, this was your like domain.
Your
and
time
I'm
to
like,
shine.
wait, what? Who? And they're like, yeah, PT. And so I forget her name. I'm so sorry. I can't remember your name, but she reached out to me. She was like, you have to get a hold of PT. I'm telling him to get a hold of you. You guys have to connect. You guys have to share some stories, because I don't know what it is, but I just connected you guys immediately. And I was like, well, that's cool. You know, all right. And I just kind of, because we get hit up for podcast stuff all the time.
Yeah.
And sometimes it works with the avenue we're working towards. Sometimes it doesn't. So I was looking at it. I'm like, oh, this is really cool. So then I did reach out to you and we were able to connect. Well, then I found out, I'm like, oh, like, you're like, yeah, I'm the host of a like radio station too. And I'm like,
Well,
I was like, okay. And then I was like, I had no idea about anything else except for your foundation. But it was really cool getting to talk to you, because you just put into perspective of just how your idea and what you had was like, you don't want to have, like, why start all these new foundations? Why constantly keep starting a foundation for suicide awareness? Like, why can't we all just work together and like create a big stamp? And that's exactly what you're doing with that hashtag. So I thought that was really cool. And it really lit a bulb in my head of like, yeah, like we should be working together. Like, unless you have a certain direction. And that's what you were telling me within your foundation that you do. You kind of send people off in other areas, correct?
Yeah. I mean, I think in the mental health space, right? Like a lot of people have good intentions when they embark on a journey based on whether it's based on a loss or based on their own, stories or whatever. And sometimes that journey turns into a scenario where they start an event or they start an organization or a nonprofit or whatever. And I think the point that I think we want to look at with Livin, or just in general, is it's like there's a lot of busy work that goes on. Full transparency. Like, we have a lot of stuff going on with Livin where I'm like, man, we're all volunteers. Yeah. And it's like, I wish there was a lot of more time in the day to be able to do these things, or more people like on board or whatever. And so I think just sometimes, if people are like, hey, they come to me and they go, hey, like, my friend, unfortunately lost somebody. Like, we want to start an event. We want to start a music festival or whatever. And I'm like, all right, well, like I'm already running a music festival. Like I don't really have a lot of bandwidth to do yours too, or whatever. And then, or, you know, similar story, maybe they want to do, you know, another event, or maybe they want to start an organization. And I always just say, look, before you do that, like, try to do whatever you're doing for at least a year and have it benefit or partner with somebody else that's already in the space. Okay. Because then you can make sure that you give yourself some time to ensure that you want to take on all of the other elements of that. You know what I mean? And so I just think that sometimes, we're all going in different directions, and pretty soon it's like, well, you know, geez, Samantha's already doing that. Like I'll talk to, whatever, just somebody new, and they'll say, well, I really want to do this. And I'm like, why don't you just work with Samantha and make it awesome? Like, make it some more collaboration.
I love that. It was super, it's just great. And it's smart. It's exactly what we should be doing. And it also helps with the whole thing is like, you don't want to be doing it all on your own. Like, it's a lot of work.
Well, we're all better together in this community. Right. And so, it's a little bit of a, I don't want to say that it's a innovative thought. I guess it is kind of innovative in our space. I wish it wasn't as an innovative of a thought, I guess. But it tends to be, and for better or for worse. I mean, believe me, everybody that is in this space is in it for, to try to get to hopefully the same place, which is more, awareness, ultimately preventing, suicides. I struggle with the fact that I don't know if we're ever going to like end suicide. I mean, like, I just don't know if like that, to me, I want to set goals that are attainable, and the idea of like completely ending suicide is a goal that I just don't know if I just don't know. Like humans, I think we are broken by nature in some capacity. So like I don't look at it that way and whatever, but I do think that at some point in time, like we've already gotten to some really cool places.
I was going to say this year they finally came up with like a 988.
Yeah, the 988, which is super cool.
Yeah.
So like even with 988, which for your listeners and viewers, it's basically like 911 for mental health, right? So I think even just the fact that we have a 3-digit number. I mean, like the 1-800-273-TALK. I mean, here I'm in the business, and it's like, what was it again? Whatever. Yeah. But having 988, I think, is a huge step, even on top of the fact that it's going to hopefully get us to some places and save some lives. Just the fact that we now can have this conversation and we can raise our kids with the fact that it's like, hey, 911, 988, these, you have these numbers.
Stop,
like,
drop, and roll.
Right, exactly. Like, it's just like, oh, that's like part of what I, who I need to be. Yeah. And so I think it's a huge step as a culture of where we need to be. I think you're absolutely right. It's a big deal.
For sure. So I want to kind of jump into, how did you get into your line of work in a way? Like, what made you decide? Because you have the best radio voice. I just want to let you know that.
So for the wolf, you mean?
Yeah.
So it's a little hoarse right now. I'm on vocal rest right now. So I'm doing a podcast with you guys. So I guess you're absolutely right. So I was a sales guy my whole life, okay? And my dad was a sales guy. I knew I was going to be in the sales landscape. I went to UW-Madison for college, so is where I went to college, and I came out and started doing a sales gig for like 7-8 years, and had a falling out with my boss, which I'm sure there's people that have been there, done that for whatever, but and people had sort of said, I always loved radio. My dad and I would just we loved radio in general, specifically country radio. And the fact that I'm in country radio right now is awesome. And I'm like, you know what? Like, I had done a podcast or whatever. And I'm like, I'm just going to do this. Like, I think this is who I am. Like, it's not about what I want to be or what I want to do, to support my career or life or whatever. It's like, this is just who I am. Like, I'm a radio personality. I just don't have a microphone yet.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? That's why I looked at it. So I started in sales, and people are like, well, you're going to go back to school and learn it? I'm like, nope. I'm going to do what I've done for everything else. I'm going to go sell. So I sold for, at the time it was Clear Channel Radio. It's now iHeartMedia or whatever.
Sure, yeah.
And I sold for them for a couple years and actually, did pretty well. And they were, when I quit, I was like kind of a rising, I don't want to say rising, but I was like a rising sales guy. They're like young sales pup, and they're like, you're going to do what? And I'm like, I'm going to chase my radio dream. I'm going to knock on doors, all up and down the radio dial until somebody gives me a shot. And they did. And, the rest is history. I literally said this to them. You guys appreciate this being in kind of your lines of work and more of an entrepreneurial nature. I came to the owner of the radio station. I said, hey, I would like an opportunity to be on air. You don't have to give it to me. I will earn that right 100%. And I'll sell for you in the meantime. So I'll sell for you, right? And then I just want you to like teach me and just give me a shot at some point in time to be on air, okay? Well, what I did was I had this concept that I stole, and I'll say that I stole because people in radio, it's the whole, like, if you're doing something, chances are someone stole it from somebody. Someone's already done that. So Oak on the Water is with Cities 97. I used to sell for Cities 97, okay? And I watched the concept of Oak on the Water. I watched how it was sold. I watched how it was delivered. I watched how it was, brought to life and everything. And I was like, this is brilliant. I could take it to a country audience and call it PT on the Patio. Okay. And I could host patio parties, and it would be me and Pat and like live music or whatever. And so I sold a PT on the Patio sponsorship to Corona and Jack Daniels. So I literally sold a package before I was even on air. So
that's amazing.
So I went back to the station. I'm like, well, I sold this. Like, I probably should be on the air with the radio station some capacity. So,
if you guys don't take me, somebody else will.
Right. Like at this point in time, like,
best bidder wins.
And the rest is history. And like PT on the Patio is now, 8 years strong and
awesome.
Having fun with that and, whatever. And I obviously moved to the Wolf when I had a chance to try a different station, I guess, or whatever, and that landscape. And then I got a chance to be on air with mornings, which is super awesome. And it's, morning radio is, I mean, it's interesting. It's different. But I love it. And I think I think my personality, probably could fit some other places on air, but, morning is probably a good spot for me. I think once I get vertical, it's not always easy.
I was going to say, what time do you have to get up?
So I set my alarm for 2:40, 2:45, 2:48, 2:53. No. So we get down.
I would kick you out of the bed.
I know. So my wife does. So
I would be like dead.
So basically I get one snooze in bed and then I'm on the couch. That's the rule.
You move from one laying spot to the other.
Right.
I do that too, though.
So I'm like, I do a decent amount of snoozing on my couch, but usually we're downtown Minneapolis by about 3:30 in the morning. So the early mornings they're aggressive for sure.
Right.
But I love it. And, once I'm vertical, I probably have as much energy as, most people after, 6 cups of coffee or whatever. But yeah, very grateful for the opportunity with the Wolf, and it's super fun. And I think, to be honest, like, it's just talking about who I am or who I've maybe become as the founder of Livin and just being a radio personality. I think it just has fit really nicely with a lot of things that I've been involved with, if that makes sense. So
just having your purpose.
It all really works together well for you.
Right.
I mean,
so
it's like a package deal.
Right. So if I'm doing, music events with Livin, okay, when it's mostly country, well, then I have a country organization, and then I'm a country radio personality, so that makes sense. So it's sort of it was very organic in that.
Which is how it has to be.
Right. I think that
it makes a huge difference, I think. And I think it shows in your product too, that it's just from the heart. It's who you are.
Well, I appreciate that. The nugget that I'll never forget is my friend told me one time about a book that he had read when it came to businesses and profit and really like value and stuff like that. And I think it's from a gentleman named Lou Carbone. But basically, businesses that go in business to make a profit, like, that's a backwards way about it. You should go into business to provide value for your clients. And then the positive benefit of that value for your clients is profitability for your company, right? So like, if you think of, Starbucks or Caribou, right? Like, they don't sell coffee. They sell experience. They sell the joy of waking up and feeling good about life or whatever, right? And then those feelings then turn into more coffee sales, which turns into, profitability. So I think, to your point about the organizations and definitely getting back to Livin, I've always told our people, our volunteers, our leaders within the organization, our board, that like, if and when we can continue to focus on the mission and the why, a big Simon Sinek guy when it comes to the why. Like, if you start with why, that everything will fall into place. You know what I mean? Like, assuming that the why is hopefully in the right place, which, again, thankfully with Livin, for the most part it has been, and it's touched a lot of people in some pretty positive ways. And we're just going to keep doing it every single day. If we can, change one person's life, man, like, that'd be pretty powerful,
Exactly. So you have a huge event coming up after our little break we just had.
We do. So we call it the Livin Music Festival. It takes place at ERX Motor Park in Elk River, which is just north of kind of the main last intersection there. Yeah, it's in Minnesota. Yep. So for people that are listening in other parts, so northern part of the Twin Cities, basically, they have 500 acres there at ERX Motor Park. So we kind of created this event, and it always happens in September because of the fact that September is Suicide Prevention Month, and specifically, we tried to get it somewhat close to September 10th, which is World Suicide Prevention Day, but it typically ends up being the week after that. Like this year, it's literally the Saturday afterwards. It's Saturday, September 17th. But it's designed, and, you know, kind of what we were talking about earlier on, where Livin is kind of finding your purpose and that the ability to like put your head down at night and say that I took advantage of the breath that I was given today, and like the things in life that really maybe put a smile on your face and peace in your soul. So we've got a barbecue competition and a cookout, right? Basically with ribs. And we've got music all day long. Yep. We've got cornhole tournament. We've got camping. So
I was like, can I tent out there?
Right. Yeah. So there's camping on site. So camping, if you think about it, is definitely a live-in type thing for a lot of people. Yeah. Music is live-in for a lot of people. You know, barbecue competition and food is living for people, like just being outdoors. Yeah. There's a bunch of kids activities. We'll have like a petting zoo, stuff like that. So a few things for the kids during the day. Basically the entire event, Friday evening, all day Saturday music is all free. The only part that's actually ticketed is Saturday night's main stage performance. But if you think about
which
is Lone Star. Ooh. So if you're familiar with Lone Star, I would say kind of a 90s, early 2000s.
Baby, I'm amazed by
there you go.
I was just gonna say
we should start ripping Amazed. Mr. Mom, if you know that song. A lot of like my mom's always like Mr. Mom, rewind Barney for the 18th time or whatever. She's always saying that. It probably dates her or me a little bit, but so Lone Star is our headliner. It's usually in the country music realm more so, just because that's where I exist. But I mean, I would say that, you know, the artist on the main stage this year, Chad Johnson, who you guys know from the south side of the Twin Cities, you know, he's based out of Northfield. He's super talented. I mean, I would consider Chad, you know, country, but I mean, almost more like on the Americana folk side of the equation. Yeah. Erin Grant is going to be there. She's from Lakeville, Minnesota originally, now living in Nashville. She's actually won the Midwest Country Music Organization Female Vocalist of the Year the last 3 years. Yes. Lake and Lindale, who won the Band of the Year the last couple of years. So really the performances and the music is pretty strong at the event. We do have a memorial part of it where we typically do some kind of whether it's a balloon release or, you know, sing Amazing Grace, whatever, kind of have an opportunity for those of us that have, you know, suffered a loss by suicide to be able to try to release a little bit, maybe have, you know, I don't want to say closure because there's never really officially closure, but I think that a lot of us, I
think it's nice to acknowledge the person, and it's nice to talk about the person.
Yes.
And it's nice to talk about people and the people you've lost, because I think sometimes you think other people have forgotten about them. So it's nice to make them still relevant and be around a lot of people who are in the same place.
Yeah.
Well, and if anybody that's listening, and thank you for that, Samantha, because you're absolutely right. If anybody that's listening has lost somebody, I mean, frankly, if you've lost someone to anything, but definitely to suicide, there is this element of where other people don't want to bring that person up because there's fear of like, triggering emotions or whatever. Okay. Now, what's interesting is, you know, I can understand early on there may be that type of resistance. However, I will definitely say that from a grief standpoint, and just from like with my dad, losing my dad, I bring my father up in like conversations a lot, and it's by design because it helps me remember him. Number one, just remember him in general and keep him a part of my life and his legacies to live on with me, but also to remember him for the way he lived rather than the way that he died. And so a lot of times, oh, you know what my dad would say, his nickname was the Hawk. You know what the Hawk would say right now? Yeah. And like, I'll say like whatever, and, you know, maybe brings a chuckle and whatever. Yeah. And that's super by design, super therapeutic. And I think that deliberate act that me and my family have started to do in the last probably 3 to 4 years has been a huge element of like my healing process.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, you're 100% right. Like the idea of like making sure to talk about that person and to, you know, and to keep their legacy with you in some capacity is super important.
I think that's one thing I've tried to tell people is like, I love to talk about them. I think people get scared because it's like, it is a little intense at times, but I love to talk about them. The way that I tell them, I'm like just because they're gone doesn't mean you don't have any love for them anymore. Like if anything, you have all this love that you're not able to give to them anymore. So it's just stuck here. And so when I get to talk about them, when I get to share stories or express to people or even talk about even his death or anything, and if I get emotional at that moment or whatever, I'm like, it's really just all this love that I have in my heart still for him and for others around that we've lost, you know. But I go like, give people the opportunity and don't be scared of it, because it is really enjoyable, like you said, to talk about the good times, to enjoy it with other people and hear them smile and be like, oh, that's really funny. And it's like, they were great, you know, or they are great. And just still talk about it almost in the present tense, but recognizing that like they left their mark on this world too.
Absolutely. And I think because you do go through all those signs of grief in a different way with suicide than you do, because you have the hurt and the madness and the anger, and then it's like a whole different roller coaster the next day with it.
Yeah.
So
being vulnerable and utilizing that vulnerability to, you know, to find and create strength for you in your journey is a really, really, I mean, it's a powerful thing, right? And I think that when you are becoming emotional or whatever, and then somebody, you know, giving you that vulnerability and say, you know what, I'm going to get emotional, like at times, like that's okay. And then other people realizing that. And I think that's one thing we talk about with Livin a lot is, you know, we talk about giving ourselves the permission to be vulnerable or to like, you know, this is a safe space, you know what I mean? Like, and we're talking about some topics that are really, really difficult for a lot of people, including us. But if we can give ourselves the grace and the ability to be vulnerable, then a lot of healing can come from that. And that's what's powerful, I think.
And I can tell you, I don't think there's one time that I've never opened up or talked to somebody, or it was hard for me to admit that was how he passed for a little while. Like I would just tell people like, he's gone. Does it matter? You know, that's kind of what I would say. I'd be like, does it matter how he died? Because people would be like, well, what happened? And I'd be like, does it matter? And it was hard to kind of admit that's because I felt like I had to go and describe all the great parts and all the things that he was and the whole story leading up, until I realized like you don't have to have that, you know. But I had to come to terms with myself in my grief, in my process of it all. And now I can talk about things very openly, and I'll be like, well, he actually took his own life. And everybody's like, oh, I'm sorry for asking. And it's like, well, kind of be careful about the questions you ask, but I'll be honest about it and I'll talk to you about it. But it almost never fails that when I do open up and when I kind of feel that angst of like, ugh, like I don't want to tell you that they open up and all of a sudden you hear this incredible story or something that just hit home personally for them. And all of a sudden I'm going, wow, I would have never seen this conversation going this way. And especially with some people. So it is when you're vulnerable like that. Almost every single time do I see people open up and talk about things that I don't think they talk about with anybody in here. I'm just their bartender that night, you know? Yeah. And it's cool. It's really neat to open up that space, just like you said, and to have that on such a large portion for you and a large venue in a large way. It's so cool. It's like a intimate, but not, you know, it's not so just serious
because of all the like groups and stuff that you have joined. You're like, I just don't feel that connection sometimes with
So I made a mistake and I should have brought like a bunch of like wristbands and shirts for you guys, like coming on the Twisted Sisters podcast or whatever. But like oftentimes I will take my bracelet off and I will give it to you and I will say things like, look, like Livin started as my story, but the cool thing about it is it can become your story. Okay. So when you take this bracelet, okay.
I'm taking the bracelet.
Yeah. You can take the bracelet and then you get the opportunity, and we can find other ones that are more fashion
this
forward.
Is my colors right
here. There you go. So that's, but like when you join the movement, and it's not like obviously an official thing per se, but I think one of the things about that is it's your story, right? Like when people that wear Livin swag or whatever, it's not like they're telling my story, right?
Yeah.
Like that's how it becomes a personal thing for them, because
it's like a topic opener, like a
exactly.
conversation starter.
So what's Livin? Well, let me tell you what Livin is. What is
This is
Livin
what
to
it
you?
is to me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that's the part of it that I think we are super grateful for, and I guess to a certain degree proud of, because again, I never, it's about the mission, it's about the why, and it becomes your story, and then your, like you just did right there, like so eloquently told your story. It's like, gosh, if I'm listening and I'm like, man, maybe I could tell my story too, and like opening up, and that's a super powerful thing.
Yeah, I really love that you're on here and sharing all this. This is really cool.
This is great. I appreciate the opportunity.
It's really awesome.
I don't get as much opportunity to go, to go as in depth with it. So I'm grateful for that with you guys.
Can you just share with some of our listeners, like maybe how, because you're a public voice, and sort of go through something so tragic, especially with your father. How did you get by on your day-to-day life? Like, how do you get up and keep moving?
What do I do for living? What do I do to live, basically?
It doesn't always start that way.
No.
It's not always this beautiful story. It's usually you're in a really dark place, and you have to choose to get up, or you have to shower that day, or, maybe you need to eat or not drink, or whatever it is. You have to absolutely, or maybe you don't feel, or maybe you don't want, it's just, grief hits everybody so differently.
So I will say that after losing my dad, so that would have been 2013, I would say subsequently the following year, I tried to be pretty strong for my family, like for my brother, my sister, and my mom. And I think I tried to I don't want to say brush it under the rug by any means, but I tried to just go on with my life, and it's like, I'm just going to be super busy or whatever, and just not really deal with it, to be really honest, and I think I got myself into some scenarios, probably with, a little bit with drinking, or just maybe not as much with drinking, but I think I was just reckless in a lot of areas in my life. I was reckless financially. I was reckless, definitely with alcohol. I did not do other drugs or whatever per se, but I was definitely just the thought of tomorrow I didn't really care that much. You know what I mean? And
I do know exactly.
Yeah. And I don't know if I was ever really, I don't think I truly struggled with suicidal ideation at that point, but I certainly was very depressed. I was not happy about who I was. And to your point, I was not proud of the situation that I was in. Let's just put it that way. I remember specifically, I would get a wedding invitation from my friends. They're going to get married. And normally you'd be happy about that, right? And I was upset because my friends were having great, they were having babies or whatever. And I was like, oh, and it's like, who am I? I almost had to look at myself and go, how am I frustrated? How am I angry with my good friend of 20 years who's getting married? But because I was
So you're not happy.
Yeah, I was super unhappy inside, and it got to the point where I did start going to a group therapy type thing. And funny, I kind of started Livin, and I started talking about Livin on the air, and I made Livin about not just your own existence, but about mental health and finding your peace, and it's so
as
much
you're
different.
on your journey.
Yeah. It is the journey, not the destination. I realize that. And, at the time there was a little bit of you're familiar with YOLO, right?
Yeah.
YOLO.
YOLO.
And people kind of misconstrued Living for YOLO. And I said, and what I told people, and here's the difference, and this will always be the difference, is the idea of YOLO is a hedonistic view of today only matters. It's only about today or whatever. Okay. Which is YOLO, whatever. And you just kind of throw caution to the wind. Where Livin, in my opinion, it's a deliberate existence to find peace with your life. Okay. So that's where you can find.
I love that.
It's a deeper, it's YOLO is happiness, which can be fleeting, whereas Livin is the search for peace. Okay.
Yeah.
And happiness and peace can be very different in the definition that I usually use, because I think happy comes from, nice things, or happy just comes from great weather or whatever. But if you truly have peace, it could be storming out here right now, and I'd be like, you know what, man, it's the most beautiful day I've ever seen, because it like transcends, just happiness.
Enough of it. There's no ending. You're living. There's no destination. You're living.
Yeah.
It's the journey. It's totally it.
And that's what it kind of became or whatever. And that's, to me, without getting too, because the question you asked is like, where do I find, like, how do I get up every day, right? And like living kind of became my thing. Like living almost became like, if I could put all my energy and effort in that I was spending, hating on whatever existence I was living in, and I could focus on living and creating this culture of, again, deliberate existence and loving, the people that you're with and spending time and energy and effort to like really take advantage of the breath you were given. It was like a journey of like, oh my God, like I need to find like my happiness,
That's a whole mental switch.
Yeah,
like
right.
To change your thought process like that is super hard.
It's almost like super hardcore with like the self-actualization. Yeah. Like the pyramid of needs, like it's like, whoa, this is like super crazy. And at the time, I don't think I like thought about it like that deeply, but then like some other things we've talked about, it kind of became an organic, an organic journey that way. And so is it possible to say that the Livin Foundation saved my life? In a way, yes. Wow. I don't know if I would say that I, potentially would have taken my life had I continued to be down that reckless path, right. But I also don't know that, Yeah. So, I never like make those assumptions or whatever, but, so living is a big part of who I am. And it kind of, in a lot of ways, it made me who I am today more so than probably anything else.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Yeah. My other question for you is, so you've like kind of found your purpose, we'll say, right? Like you found your purpose for living, you found your purpose in life, and it happened in like, this is what that kind of became for me. And that was because of Allie here. She helped me. She was like, you need to find what you want to, like, what's your purpose here? Not in that sense, but it was like, how can I help you find a reason to get up? And how can I help you find a reason to keep moving? And it was never that I had suicidal thoughts, but if I were to have died yesterday, I could have cared less.
Yeah.
If I died tomorrow, I just didn't care. I think your lack of enthusiasm for anything, you just don't feel. That was my issue. And so she was like, let's start this podcast. And I was like, I was like, yeah, okay.
It's an awesome idea. Yeah, super crazy, super twisted, but awesome.
Yeah, I came up with the name, like while peeing on the toilet, actually. This is real twisted.
Yes.
But it was just without her help of just getting the momentum started. I don't know if I ever would have gotten this. I might have gotten it started, but it probably would have been in like 5 years.
Well, just having that accountability partner within it.
And it was that like push to like, she was like, okay, we have this set now. And I was like, all right, cool. And then all of a sudden I could get into it. And then all of a sudden I could keep moving forward. But it's hard. So like I look at your story and I think like, damn, that mental strength, like just to like push through and keep going, but almost like you saw exactly where your weakness was and you just flipped it. And you were like, if I have to get through this, so is everybody else. Like you guys are all coming along because I'm not alone in this. And that's the exact truth.
Well, so first of all, I appreciate that very much. And kudos to you guys for having that partnership. I think there's two things that are cool there. Allie, for her to be able to kind of push you along, but also for you to recognize her as a support structure like that. Like that's super big because I think sometimes we don't always recognize the people in our lives that are like either have been put there for a reason or, they're, finding their purpose for that stuff. So I think that's super cool. So, kudos to you for recognizing that early and often. And that's a very special relationship.
I know my time will come to push her, vice versa. We're never on the same page. I can tell you that. We're always like one of us is behind and the other one, and then we catch up a little bit, but it works.
That's what a marriage is.
Yeah.
80-20.
The wife I never knew I needed.
Yeah. Well, I mean, do you feel like, so what if you would say like what kind of things, so the podcast is your living at this point in time?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So this
it's
is where
definitely turned into the foundation of how I share my story very open and honestly, and I'm not gonna lie, that was like one of the hardest episodes to put out, but it was the one that I knew was most needed at the same point. I struggle with if as you get out and you tell your story and you know how to we have to market our podcast. We want people to see it.
Yeah.
But my end game isn't to be famous.
Yeah.
Right. So you have all these clashing ideas and these clashing opinions, you could say.
Imposter syndrome.
And so it's like, how do I be my most unapologetically me in doing this, but also get it out so that people can see it and hear our story, because I know that the more people that join in, because we have two completely different stories and I love it. And I think that's what's really great, is to show like we can all coexist with really different stories, really different backgrounds, but also find similarities in each other and a commonality in that we all just want to be loved. We all just want to feel loved, and we all want to be heard, and we all want to be seen every once in a while. And that's completely normal.
Well, I would say that somebody connecting with you in any capacity, like whether it's through the podcast or through social media or through any channels, just, at even at the bar or whatever, right? Like, it doesn't always have to be through the fact that, there's a loss by suicide, right? Like, I think that there's a lot of things that come from that. There's a lot of life lessons that you probably have picked up that, probably are shared by somebody else as well. And that's, we're all human. Like you said, we're all kind of on this rock together doing our thing.
What do you always say, Allie?
Spinning on a round ball.
Spinning on a round ball, man. We're all here, so it's like, just, find the people that you want, that you're connecting with, and you have that. And believe me, when it comes to the podcast universe, and frankly, anything, like there are plenty of opportunities for people to find other things other than Twisted Sisters podcast. Right, So if they don't want to be a part of it, don't let the door hit them in the butt on the way out. Okay. Seriously, that's what you should do.
Yeah.
Like if they're drawn to your journey, either of your journeys, or if they're drawn to, the guests that you bring on the show, or if they're drawn to, your personality, your outlook on things, your perspective, et cetera, those are the things that are going to cultivate, and that have cultivated, obviously, your friends, family, people that are going to be a part of, the Twisted Sisters, like community, if you will, right? No
Soul
different
tribe.
than living, right? Yeah, like there's people that join that, again, I keep saying join as if you're like pledging or something like that. It's like, maybe we should do that. We're like, hey, pledge to wear your wristband and to wear a t-shirt once a week. No, I'm just kidding. But people that have become, big advocates for the Livin Foundation, that, they have not suffered a loss. So it's not like you have to be, take any cause, right? I mean, take, Pride has allies, the Black Lives Matter movement, you know what I mean? Like it's like, there's all these movements, and you don't have to be like, I'll say, directly affected by it in order to like embrace the ideologies of what that is. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, we should treat people equally. Like, oh, that's cool. I like that. I can get down with that, or whatever. Like,
I like the color red.
Yeah. Like, oh, okay. Awesome.
Me too.
So like, oh my gosh, you like water. I like water. And we should get along, I don't know. So, I think that, the one thing I will say that people are drawn to, and I think on the episode that you had with Mick Sterling, he brought it up, is just like, I think people are drawn to, an attractive, positive, just life force, right? So if you can bring to people some positive nature and maybe an outlook on life that they can appreciate or whatever, like, hopefully people are resonating with that, know? And again, if they don't, that's fine too. There's plenty of negativity out there. Find your negativity.
And spinning off kind of how you said that earlier was like, the concept has been done. I mean, like, we can go anywhere and the concept has been done, but it hasn't been done by you with your spin, with your creativity, the colors that you like, the vision that you have. And that's what makes it special, because I was reading it was a self-help book, and I can't remember which book it is right now, but they were talking about like the liquor industry, and like we can say a hard seltzer, right? The hard seltzer's been done, but somebody else wants to come in and create their own hard seltzer. But even if you do like 10% of or like even 0.05% of what we'll say like Bud Light is doing or any of those, like you're still millions of dollars. Like you're still crushing it.
Yeah.
And you're doing it though in your way. And somebody's going to look at your label and say, oh, I like that because of your twist and how you did it. And it was like one of those things of like, oh, there is a place for me. There is a place for that person. And so even if you have done it, there's still a place for you.
Well, it kind of reminds me of like, so I love what you guys bring to the table. So like Twisted Sisters is like fun. Like I want to be a part of that community, right? But that doesn't mean that I don't like the Twisted Brothers, right? This is the problem. I'm serious. Like I'm going to draw a comparison to our social media / political landscape that we have kind of created for ourselves, where like literally, if you are this, you can't be this.
Yes,
does that make sense?
I agree.
And it's like, to me,
can't I be a contradiction?
Yes. Like, can't like, so that's this, it's really weird. It's like, we have this weird, really, dichotomy scenario where like we feel as though, oh gosh, you're an Allie person. Oh, well, I'm a Samantha person. So I guess we can't be friends. Like that's so wrong. Like you could be a part, like, I don't know. It's very,
it's like when people break up.
That's
you
have to pick sides or something.
You don't have to pick sides. This is not junior high relationship. This is life on the third rock from the sun, as Allie would say.
It's so crazy. I don't know. I was writing in my journal and I was talking about like contradictions. I just usually have words that I'll focus on. Yeah. But I was like, God, I'm such a contradiction. I am sometimes, because I'm like, I really like to be the life of the party, but I like to be in.
But you're an introvert or whatever.
So you have those contradictions of like, it was kind of strange to me. I was like, how do I even explain myself? Or when you're writing a bio, right? I'm like, I'm fun, but I'm crabby and pissy too, I'm this, but I'm that. And you're like, I can be all of it. I can be all of it.
And it's totally okay. And that's what makes you you. Yeah, absolutely.
Just out here trying to live in.
just listen.
Just trying to hashtag living.
Just trying to get through it, And like you said, it's like I think this is the point where I should, like, at some point in time, announce that I'm like going to run for a political office. I announced it on the Twisted Sisters podcast.
Please do it on our show.
Because from a political standpoint. Like, honestly, sometimes I do get that feeling. I'm like, okay, we have groups of people that like just continually want to, be, again, like tearing us apart. And I'm like, I feel like most people are in the middle. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's like, this is super weird.
And they seem to be really loud, don't they?
Right.
And I think
why are the people that are the crazy ones always the loudest? Like, I'm pretty loud. Like, I feel like I'm relatively with it.
Nobody cares what I have to say because it's all like rainbows and butterflies. Like, you hear that negative stuff and it catches your attention for a reason.
So when I get my career where it needs to be and I'm running for political office, I'm announcing it on the Twisted Sisters podcast.
Perfect.
It's probably
it
may be a decade or so from now by the time I get my stuff figured out.
Twisted Sisters,
we'll need a walker.
It would be the Twisted Mamas or the Twisted Grandmas or something like that.
Dear God, don't say that yet. I'm not a grandma yet.
Yeah.
I have a 16. We're not going that way yet.
We have Twisted Brothers. That's what they say. But
our boys, they're like, we're going to start a podcast called Twisted Brothers. It's like, you do it.
Yeah.
You do you, boo.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
I know.
PT will wear a shirt that says it.
Yeah. Whatever. I'll wear any shirt about anything,
Well, it has been an absolute honor and pleasure to have you on today. The interviewer is being interviewed, so that's kind of fun.
We love it. It's not always that I'm on this side of the microphone, but I'm grateful for it. This was a lot of fun, ladies. I appreciate it.
I do have one more question. Sure. Quick. Who is the best celebrity that you have interviewed?
Oh, good one.
The best, without question, is Garth Brooks.
Okay.
So I had a chance to meet him in person when he was here at US Bank Stadium. And the best part is I did not want to take like a picture, like a staged photo. So I just told the guy, I said, here, just videotape, like just video me talking to Garth Brooks. And I talked one-on-one with Garth Brooks for about a minute. And I actually made him laugh at one point in time. But he did give me an incredibly awesome piece of advice that I'll drop on you as the show closes here. He says that people live in the moment and the entertainer lives in the moment right before the moment and then just lets that moment happen. So Garth knows every time there's going to be a moment, it's almost like he sets it up and then lets the moment happen, and he knows that moment's going to happen, and that's why he's such a great entertainer.
That's beautiful.
How about that? Yeah.
I love that. Thank you so much.
Much love, ladies. Much love. All right.
Help, hope, and hugs. #living, you guys. Thanks for listening to
See you
Twisted
at the festival,
Sisters.
all right?
Yes.